In 2005, Karrine Stefans releases Confessions of a Video Vixen, and Miss Karrine Stefans had the entire industry shook. I actually recently read Confessions of a Video Vixen, and I have been dying to talk about it. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. And if you don't remember the cultural phenomena of the video vixens and what they meant to us culturally, and you're certainly not familiar with Karrine Stefans, let's take a walk down memory lane. I am a millennial, and something that we had growing up were video vixens. So video vixen is essentially a video model, and they were these beautiful girls that were sought after for their beauty and their aesthetic and their sexuality and their vibe. And if you were a notorious rapper or you were on the up and coming as a rapper, you needed to have a video vixen in your music videos. They were used as props, as eye candy. Essentially, the success and the popularity of an artist was intrinsically connected to video vixens. And if you think about it, part of the appeal of rappers is their ability to be surrounded by and have access to all of these beautiful women. Back then, and even today, being surrounded by beautiful women for men is a status symbol. So in this way, video models and male artists were basically inseparable. Could be rest assured that in any hip-hop or R&B music video of the day, you would see a bronze, racially ambiguous, beautiful, curvaceous, bodacious girl coming out of the pool or the beach, her skin glistening, in a skimpy bikinis with wavy curly hair. They were the ultimate sex symbols, and by all accounts, they were the it girlies of the day. All the girls wanted to look like them. All of the men, the rappers, the artists, the industry executives wanted to sleep with them. And we knew their tea. We knew who they were dating. We knew who they were sleeping with. We would watch music videos on MTV and BET and be able to spot them out by name. We had the likes of Gloria Velez, Lauren London, Black China, Karrine Stefans, Melissa Ford, Esther Baxter, Buffy the Body. I mean, we knew them by name. And mind you, this was a time where there was no Instagram, there were no podcasts. We had to get all of our tea through magazines, through interviews, through traditional media. Now, although all of the women that I just mentioned really gained popularity in the mid 1990s to early 2000s, the concept and the idea of the video vixen itself really dates back to the 1980s, where we start to see music videos really become essential to an artist and their career. And because sex sells, and more to that, sexy women sell more, if a male artist had some form of eye candy in their music videos, it would drive viewership. Essentially, industry executives took notice that these women could help drive viewership, and so they became key marketing tools, which ties back to this idea that video models later coined video vixens, especially with the shift from these women being exclusively white to exclusively POC, black, or racially ambiguous, were tied to the success of the artist. So in that way, the video vixen became essential to the hip-hop industry, the music industry overall, and they were a phenomenon. Goes without saying, right? I mean, these girls were highly critiqued. They were critiqued for promoting hypersexuality, for promoting a fast lifestyle, having sexual relationships, entanglements, breaking up happy homes, breaking up happy marriages, you name it. They were hyper critiqued. So that sets up the context of the memoir. That was the cultural climate that this book was written in. Karrine Stefans is sort of like the OG video vixen. At her prime, Karrine was making $2,500 per day as a video model. She was nicknamed Superhead for her ability to salaciously satisfy men, and she would appear in music videos with Jay-Z and R. Kelly, LL Cool J, Mystical, and she would help all of these rappers sell millions just with her sensual dancing and fiery sex appeal alone. She was featured in magazines and at one point had an acting gig, and she was one of the most sought after women in the industry. She had a lot of entanglements and sexual relationships with a lot of high profile men, and yes, many people, myself included, were quick to classify her as a hoe or a slut because of her numerous sexual encounters with high profile men, of which she was never shy to admit or write about. And other women in the industry who considered themselves to be morally superior because they never slept with the talent, they never dated or slept with any of the rappers, they considered themselves to be morally superior to someone like Karrine, who was known as Superhead. So let's go to 2005. In 2005, Karrine Stefans decides to release this tell-all memoir. Now, this memoir was the first of its kind, okay? As I mentioned before, back then we didn't have podcasts, we didn't have Instagram, where women could go and release all of the details about all of the encounters they had with all of these famous rappers and athletes and men in the industry. And so this memoir became the first of its kind, because never before had a woman in the industry opened up about her encounters with men in the industry and the details about those encounters so vividly, so openly, so honestly. And she had the industry shook. Everybody was worried about what sort of details were going to be included in this memoir. Who was she going to expose? What details was she going to include? I mean, the industry was shook. And I remember when I was doing research for this video, Karrine was doing PR interviews for the memoir when it was released, and she went on the Tyra Banks show, and for 30 minutes, Tyra Banks just sat there and berated her. And I mean, Tyra Banks is a work of art, but for 30 minutes Karrine Stefans was berated, and she was essentially assaulted out in the open for having the audacity to write a memoir like this one. And honestly, everybody just wrote it off as trashy literature. Oh, this is just some home wrecking slut writing about all of the encounters that she's had in the industry and destroying happy marriages and just outing all of these industry men. That was the reception that this memoir got. But let's honestly talk about the memoir, because I thought it was so well done. Karrine Stefans, with a great amount of detail, she takes us on a journey of her life. Her life really starts in the Virgin Islands, where she is often ridiculed, berated, emotionally and physically abused by her mother. She details horrific childhood abuse. And then the journey switches over to the United States, where she moved, and the abuse continues. She details all of the ways her mom would humiliate her. I mean, the stuff that her mom did to her was absolutely diabolical. It very much gave jealous mom. It was a very toxic environment that she grew up in. Following that, she loses her virginity by being SA'd. And you know what happens after she is SA'd? She returns home and she gets the living shit beaten out of her by her mom. After being sexually assaulted, she comes home, and instead of being met with compassion, care, questions, she gets beaten to a pulp by her mom. Following that, she runs away from home and she experiences homelessness. And she's couch surfing, living on the streets, surviving on the streets, and ultimately her mother does find her. And when her mother finds her, she brings along the cops with her. And she tells the cops, "You better make sure that my daughter returns home with me." And Karrine took a look at the cops and said, "If I return back to my mother's house, she is going to kill me." And because of this, she finds herself living with her dad. And for a period of time, things seem to be getting better until they just don't. Because we start getting dysfunction in the father's home. He marries a new woman. Things just get weird at home, and she's on the run again. And then she details how running away from home for the second time, if you will, leads her to the strip club. And she details her life as a stripper and all of the jealousy and all of the envy that is present in the stripping industry. And through the strip club, we see her entry into the music industry. She ends up meeting the father of her child and explains in great detail horrific, vile, domestic abuse. And as much as her writing is honestly simplistic, those chapters where she details the abuse that she went through with the father of her child are so bleak, and they set up the environment so well, and you just feel like you're going through this abusive relationship with Karrine. You feel the sense of fear that Karrine was having to deal with on an everyday basis. I mean, her writing just really drew the point home. Those chapters that she spent detailing her abuse at the hands of the father of her child were the absolute best chapters of this memoir. Eventually, through a daring escape, she leaves that relationship, but she leaves behind her child as well. And so for some time in the memoir, she explores what it feels like to abandon a child for the sake of survival. So we see her enter the industry and really take refuge in people like Ice-T, her relationship with Ray J, which I had no idea she had a relationship with baby Ray J at the time. We see her having an affair or an entanglement with Fred Durst. We essentially see her rise to fame and popularity and notoriety. She talks about overcoming drug addiction. She talks about constantly being used and abused. She talks about all of the sexcapades, specifically and particularly with Ja Rule, and the fact that they would have these sexcapades for days on end. They would have so much sex that they would need IV drips to be able to continue having sex for more and more days on end. She talks about her encounters with P. Diddy, and she also has a lover that she would not disclose the name of, which I found to be very interesting. And she just details how toxic it all got, how unsustainable it was, how she was constantly living at this intersection of having it all but not having anything at all. Because at its core, this memoir is a cautionary tale of an industry that back in the day, we didn't have all of the isms. We didn't have the proper progressive language to be able to understand in its complexity. A lot of the men that she speaks about have had their day in court today because of the Me Too movement, because they've been outed as abusers. So yes, a lot of the men in this memoir that she talks about have had their day in court. But remember that this was written in 2005. And in 2005, she was sounding off on just how toxic, brutal, abusive all of these men were. She was talking about this in 2005. She spoke about P. Diddy. She spoke about Ja Rule. She spoke about all of these men that today have come out as problematic, abusive monsters. She wrote about it first. The book offers a commentary on the female body, on female autonomy. But more to that, this memoir offers space for us to have a discussion on female exploitation in the industry. Like I said, back then we didn't have podcasts, we didn't have Instagram, we didn't have social media where we could have these candid, honest, open discussions. And so for that, it is candid, it is groundbreaking, and it opened the door for other women to be able to share their experiences. Following the release of her memoir, we get memoirs from Kat Stacks, Lena Powell, and so many other women who dared to share their stories of life in that industry. And the vibe of the book makes you want to read it. It is calm, it is confident, and she didn't characterize herself as the victim. She accepts consequences for her actions. She takes ownership. For her, and she mentions it numerous times in the book, and she has mentioned it in press interviews, it was never about the men. It was never about the men. It was about her autonomy, her agency as a woman, and she spoke openly about the ways in which she would use the tools at her disposal, be it her body, her looks, her attraction, her appeal, her celebrity, to be able to get ahead. And I might be in the minority, but I will say that there's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong about a woman using the tools at her disposal to beat men at their game. Fundamentally, women have always been labeled as unruly whenever they don't follow social norms or when they don't uphold socially acceptable notions of respectability. So in that way, this book really forces you to challenge and disrupt notions and ideas of respectability and the ways in which we impose those ideals of respectability onto women. Because sometimes a woman's got to do what a woman's got to do, okay? And that is the premise of this book. So I say, if you care about feminist theory, if you care about challenging respectability politics, if you want to understand power dynamics, if you want to understand what it means for a woman to live out aloud, boldly, and use whatever tools are at her disposal to survive after going through horrific abuse time and time again, and finally deciding to reclaim not only her voice, not only her story, but also her power, you need to read this book. I think it's going to fundamentally change my understanding of Black feminism forever. I think it's going to form part of my literary canon of works because it is so feminist, but I don't think Karrine intended to be so feminist. It doesn't read like she's trying to teach us anything. It doesn't read like she's trying to be overly theoretical. It just honestly reads like a diary entry, and that's what makes it all the more raw and honest and honestly beautiful to read. Ultimately, it is a cautionary tale, a memoir that really pulls back the curtain on an industry that continues to be so romanticized to this day. I mean, she does detail surviving abuse, sexual trauma, homelessness, rape, drug addiction, all by the age of 26, but fundamentally, it is a bold account of how one woman used every tool at her disposal to survive in Hollywood. It is equal parts cautionary as it is a narrative of survival, even when the means and the methods of survival weren't always ethical. And it still feels culturally relevant. I think there has been a shift from video vixens to nowadays Instagram baddies and social media personalities, even drag queens appearing in music videos, as opposed to having a group of elite, beautiful women who are circulated and moved around in the industry, as opposed to having that elite group of beautiful women. Nowadays, it's social media personalities that are appearing in all of these music videos, that are getting access to all of these elite parties, who are known and sought after for their beauty and their sex appeal. So it feels so culturally relevant, and I feel like it's always going to be a cautionary tale. Nowadays, Karrine lives a very private life. She had a little wake-up call by the end of the memoir where she almost died from her drug addiction because it got so bad. That's literally what she would be doing day in, day out. It was basically a wake-up call when she almost overdosed at a very public washroom, but in a very high-class restaurant, which is ironic, if you will. In any case, she almost overdosed on drugs, and that was fundamentally her wake-up call. She's somewhat continued to live a life in the industry, but nowadays she lives a very private life. She's gone on to be a very successful businesswoman, a life coach, if you will, and she's gone on to write a lot of books because, again, her writing is simple, but it draws you in. It's hard to explain. It really draws you in. So she is a really good writer, and I had so much fun with this one. So that ends this little deep dive of a book that I recently read. I don't know if I'm going to do more deep dives. They are very fun, but they are very taxing, and they take a while to film. I do want to just hop on here and just talk about books that really move me, talk about books thematically, break down books for you guys, break down genres, and just do all sorts of bookish things. I have very weird interests, I feel, when it comes to my books, so expect books from all over the place, but I like things that are dark, that are deep, that are unsettling, that are disturbing, somewhat disturbing. I like thought-provoking books, and this was definitely a thought-provoking read. Oh my goodness, I still think about this memoir to this day. But in any case, mis amores, I want to thank you for watching. Leave some comments down below. Let's chit chat about Confessions of a Video Vixen by Karrine Stefans. This was so good. Make sure you add it to your TBR. I promise you, you will not regret it. In any case, I want to thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Adios.